To learn the good, the bad, and the reality of the nomadic lifestyle, click the subscribe button so you don't miss anything. Click the bell notification. I've said many times that I think the government's going to do what they can to shut down the nomadic lifestyle. And I see it happening everywhere. I mean, it's just everywhere we go. And every day it's something new, something, wow, I didn't expect that. When something gets so big and unmanageable, government has to take action. I also hear a lot of people tell me, well, they can't shut it down because I have a constitutional right to live on public land, on streets and national forest and BLMs. And I really struggle with when people tell me that. I really struggle with that because I'll ask people, okay, where in the Constitution does it say that? And they don't have an answer. I mean, I never have gotten a reply back. I heard one person say the Fourth Amendment in the Constitution, but then when I looked that up, that just means that you're secure in your belongings. They have to have a search warrant. So I didn't understand how that applied. I've been doing a lot of studying on this, although I'm not a lawyer and I don't understand all the legal jargon. I have gained enough to understand what's going on here. Back in the 70s, Jacksonville, Florida was sued by some vagrants. That's what they called them back then, vagrants. These vagrants were arrested, and so they sued, and it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said you cannot arrest a vagrant. And so they stopped arresting vagrants, and then they just started passing ordinances saying, okay, I'm going to give you a ticket. You have to leave the street. Well, recently, and I don't know exactly when this happened, there was another lawsuit in Boise, Idaho, about getting tickets for being homeless. And so it went to the Ninth Circuit Court. And the Ninth Circuit Court said that it is in violation of the Eighth Amendment to give a person a ticket. The Eighth Amendment is that it's cruel and unusual punishment. So the Ninth Circuit Court, which is the court for the West Coast of the United States, said you can't give people tickets unless you can provide them with adequate shelter. So a homeless shelter. All right, this is important. The government's definition of homeless means that you do not have a permanent address. Because I hear so many nomads saying, I have a constitutional right to live in my van. Well, not in this case. If the Ninth Circuit Court has said that if you have a address and that you can live at, that they can tell you to go home. So you're not homeless, you have a home. And then if you say, okay, well, I am homeless, I do not have a permanent address and I live in my van. And then so the state of California or the city says, okay, well, I have a shelter over here that you can go stay at, go stay in my shelter. That means you have to get out of your van and go to the shelter. So nomads who are claiming, oh, I have a constitutional right, I think actually are in more jeopardy than people who are actually homeless. So if you're voluntarily living in your van, I think you're causing yourselves problems by saying, I have a constitutional right, because I don't think the Ninth Circuit Court is considering the nomadic lifestyle in this finding. I think they're talking about folks living in the parks and streets and sidewalks and tents and that kind of thing. That's what they're talking about. So those folks who are telling me I have a constitutional right are misinterpreting what the Ninth Circuit Court said and what the Supreme Court said. There's 33 cities in California that has decided to push back against the Ninth Circuit Court, which is actually kind of odd. But here's the problem. There's actually several problems. Some of the problems I don't even understand what they're trying to say. Anytime they get enough beds and shelters together, more people arrive onto the streets. And they're coming from other states because California doesn't only have a homeless problem, they have an illegal substance problem also. So people who live in, let's say, the state of Missouri, who want to go and be able to do their illegal substances are coming out to California because California isn't really enforcing illegal substance usage. So these cities are in a real pickle. Here they got the Ninth Circuit Court saying you cannot give people tickets for living on the street unless you can provide them shelters. And then you got the state of California saying, okay, we're not going to enforce illegal substances laws. So I mean, it's everywhere. They got a huge problem. Then there's another issue that says the Ninth Circuit Court did not specify certain requirements for the city to have to be obligated to. For example, If I'm a married couple, does the city have to provide beds for both individuals in the same shelter? And so there's all these questions that are being bounced around as to what is acceptable and what's not. A third problem is when they do have enough beds for all the homeless and the homeless choose not to go into the bed, then they issue a citation. Well, what the homeless then do is they take it to court and say, I've been illegally ticketed. And so then the city has to spend more money, not only on the beds, but on litigation costs. So the cost is just astronomical. So now other cities throughout the United States are kind of following suit with what the Ninth Circuit Court said, because they didn't want to get into all this litigation themselves. You know, when we're talking about smaller cities, they don't have the money to go to the Supreme Court and figure out what to do. And so each individual city is having to fight this on their own. So now that there's a coalition of cities, 33 cities, that can pool their resources together, they've asked the Supreme Court to look at this ruling. And what is it that is this really unconstitutional to say people are allowed to sleep on city streets? So the Supreme Court is going to have to decide, is homelessness a taxpayer problem? Because if you look at it from what California is saying, the folks that are paying taxes, the business owners, are paying taxes so people can live on their streets. Well, here's what the problem is people are living on the streets in front of the businesses, so nobody is coming to the businesses to buy their products and services. And so there's less taxes being pumped into the city to take care of the homeless. So it's a circular problem. So regardless of what the Supreme Court says, the nomadic community, the ones who are voluntarily coming to live in their vans, are going to have some serious issues no matter what the Supreme Court says. Because the Supreme Court is really going to be just focused on the folks that are forced on the streets to live on sidewalks and tents and that kind of thing. I think nomads are already vulnerable because, one, they already have an address. So if the Supreme Court says, yes, the Ninth Circuit Court is correct, that if you have a place to sleep, the city can tell you to go sleep there. So if you have an address, the city can say, go home. So I think this is going to cause a serious problem if the Supreme Court takes this up, and one that we all need to keep our eye on. Thanks for watching. Click like if you like the video, and happy travel.